Good afternoon, everybody. Just wait a few moments to have everybody kind of log on, see if there's any stragglers before we kick off. So we appreciate everyone's time today. This presentation should really only take 35 minutes, and we hope to have lots of questions, robust discussion after the presentation. So certainly, and the Q&A should work. If it doesn't work, we'll find out at the end, and we'll hopefully have no issues. Just give it another minute. We're up to 22 people right now, so that's good. Okay, it's by my clock, it's 3 after 2, so we'll get going. Appreciate everyone's time today joining on this important topic, which is Health Canada's consultation on towards a pathway for health products containing CBD, cannabidiol. Like I said, we will hopefully run through some of the key elements of this consultation, so to equip everybody to make their own submission to the consultation. And of course, at the end of this presentation, we will have questions, and we'll be able to take questions on the Q&A system, so we'll take all the questions at the end. The Q&A button should be at the top, and there should be no issue. If there is, let us know, and we can amend the settings. So kicking off today, I'm very honored to have some key experts to discuss this Health Canada consultation. And this presentation, we will have Deepak and Anand. Hi, Deepak, how are you? Good, and he's from ASDA Consultancy Services. And of course, Ashley, how are you doing? It's great to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Ashley is the lead on this file for the Canadian Health Food Association. And then, of course, we have Danielle Byrne. How are you doing, Danielle?
I'm great. Thanks, Shane.
Yeah. Danielle's the principal at OB Consulting and is very involved for the last number of years on this issue. And we have also Jay McMillan from Uber Green Consulting. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Doing great, Shane. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I'll kick off into the presentation here, and so the presentation outline will be really just a very quick background to discuss how we got here. Really, these set of slides will be just so that you'll have them when this presentation gets sent around. We will be sending this presentation around. So these are cornerstone slides to help you from a background perspective. We'll dive into the Health Canada consultation. We've identified about 10 or 11 issues that we're going to go line by line, essentially, or issue by issue or question by question, that we feel will be important for you to be able to understand how Health Canada has positioned it, what the issue is, or how does it set itself up in relation to the deregulation of CBD. And also then, we will be discussing and proposing our own approach to our own submission to this consultation as we go through the elements, and you'll see where we'll be pinpointing some of these key issues and recommendations. We'll also have a quick summary at the end and a conversation about next steps and where everyone can get involved and what you can do. So really quick, these are just going, I'll go run through this. We are the Cannabis Health Products Coalition, CHPC. We've been involved in this in 2020, since 2022. We got a group of us, stakeholders got together. We weren't seeing any movement on the CBD file, even though Health Canada had committed to actually moving forward with the regulation of CBD. We're working to try to ensure that health products made of cannabis are allowed to be sold in Canada and hopefully abroad as well as a result. Some key actions to date. We've been, our last consultation submission was in 2022. We've had some in-person events. We've been communicating with Health Canada senior management and executive to push them to make changes. We met with key new staff at the Health Canada Natural Health Products Directorate, where this file now sits. This is not a cannabis file anymore. It's now sitting with the Natural Health Products Directorate. We also pushed very hard with the Cannabis Act Review to flag this, and they actually had a recommendation to rapidly advance this. We wrote a whole bunch of letters, and the Health Canada leadership, we've been putting them under pressure, and they're really just from month to month, just keeping the pressure on to make sure. As a result of this, we obviously got this consultation, which I think I'll speak on everyone's behalf. We're not exactly happy with this. It's another round of consultations, but it is what it is, and we have at least we have something moving. Bit of background. In theory, the cannabis health products would be health products containing cannabis would be approved under Food and Drugs Act. They would, the current focus is CBD in its pure form, and to be allowed to be able to use in products with a health claim. So there's two pieces to this. It's using CBD or other, we hope, minor cannabinoids that are low risk and be able to make a health claim. Why would we want to regulate this differently? Well, look, the Scientific Advisory Committee, which Health Canada set up, has recommended to have this CBD in particular and possibly other minor cannabinoids deregulated, so taken out of the current regulatory regime where CBD is basically regulated the same as THC, which doesn't make much scientific sense, in which they reiterated. And also, there's a real demand on the consumer benefit side on CBDs. So, we know for a fact that Canadians are buying illegal CBD products because they don't understand the current regulatory system. And many of these CBD products are making health claims as well, and there's some serious issues around quality and questioning. So the idea is to regulate it properly, smartly, and in a responsible fashion, but not regulate it in the same way as THC. Look, it's a very large potential industry for Canada, for home and abroad. It's estimated to be, currently we're missing $1 billion market not having these products, and we're really pushing hard. But this is not the first consultation where this road around CBD deregulation has been on the books for 9 years. I won't go through the timeline, but there has been movement across this in Health Canada for nearly a decade, and it's quite slow moving, but pressure is required. So this brings us to the current Health Canada consultation. So this is entitled, it was published March 7th, entitled Towards a Pathway for Health Products Containing Cannabidiol, which is CBD. Obviously, Health Canada's goal, as stated in the consult, is to protect human health and safety of Canadians while allowing effective, high-quality products which are supported by adequate evidence for human and animal use to treat specific minor elements. So this discussion paper really is the first time Health Canada has put an idea or informal wording that to take CBD, and they want to take it out of the cannabis regs and Cannabis Act and the framework and put it into the NHP. And that's why the Natural Health Products Group is actually leading this file at this point. There's the link there to the to the consult, and we can come back to that at the end. However, we've identified a whole bunch of questions and issues, and my partners on this call will help go through many of these. They're more expert than I am on many of these aspects. So certainly the next number of slides we'll be having a discussion around exactly how we want to actually put forward the responses, and also really enlighten people on this call about some of the issues they should be thinking about as they put forward their own consultation, which we highly recommend you do. So the first issue that came up was a really interesting one, where really this consultation has narrowed the scope just to focus on CBD. Previous CHP Cannabis Health Products consults and considerations had looking at minor cannabinoids or cannabinoids of low risk to be incorporated, but Health Canada clearly has just focused on cannabidiol here, and there's just we think this is a pretty big problem. Because if you look at the evolution of the consultation, we've gone from minor cannabinoids that are low risk all the way just now we're focusing on CBD. So this is something that I think we really need to drill home and force Health Canada to have a conversation about widening it, that it's not just CBD, but the framework should be allowing, be flexible enough to allow other minor cannabinoids, that's like CPG and others that would fall into a low risk category and would be able to be utilized in these natural health products containing cannabidiol, but it should be containing cannabinoids. I think that's the key issue. So that's number one. There's another big issue with the limits of THC, and certainly Deepak, you can take it over from here and have a conversation on this point that I think will be important.
Thanks, Shane. Hi, everyone. Good to see a lot of you that are recognized on this call. Just a further background on CHPC, in addition to what Shane mentioned, we're really the only industry group, and the reason the four of us predominantly came together is to put pressure on Health Canada. We're the only industry association focused solely on this objective, which is basically seeing CBD being launched as an NHP product in Canada. So with that, I'll jump into the issue at hand. So one of the things that we saw in the consultation was really not a question that Health Canada is actually even consulting on. It's just something that is a bit of a foregone conclusion, and that is with respect to the maximum amount of THC that can be contained in any of these NHBCCs as proposed by Health Canada. And that tolerance level is at 10 parts per million or 10 ppm. That basically is, extraordinarily low. It's 0.001% THC. Just to put things into perspective, the Scientific Advisory Committee that Health Canada had launched came up with a recommendation of 0.3% of THC. So that's almost 300 times lower than what the Scientific Advisory Committee that Health Canada had set up recommended. It's also almost 100 times lower than the existing USP monograph that currently is open for consultation, which closes in July, which is at a 0.1% impurity level. From a practical standpoint, on the next slide, basically, what this means for industry is it obviously creates a number of challenges, mainly around manufacturing because of the limit of detection, as well as the ability to be able to test product up to 10 ppm. Some labs can do it in certain countries, others can't. And then there's the efficacy argument around that very, very low percentage of 10 ppm. So we see that as being a pretty significant issue. A number of clients that I've spoken with have identified the 10 ppm low detection level as being a challenge. And we intend, at least in our submission, to go back to Health Canada and say, hey, this is in obviously contravention of what your own Scientific Advisory Committee has recommended, but also is in contravention of the USP, which is referenced in various sections of the cannabis regulation. So those are sort of two arguments to be able to pose to Health Canada that help kind of push back on this issue. In addition to that, it's sort of, if you go back, it really, it really puts sort of a limit around exports and around, our ability to compete on the international stage, in addition to just the manufacturing challenges. That takes me to question 3. Shane mentioned at the outside, it is being considered as a medicinal ingredient. That's what Health Canada has basically decided to classify this within the NHP self-care framework. This is an active substance in that the product basically delivers intended therapeutic or physiological effects. And then there's various characteristics that basically medicinal ingredients have within the NHPD, and those are sort of listed here. The one that I'll probably highlight the most is the evidence requirement, and Ashley's going to talk a lot about this in her slide, but I do want to call out that the medical ingredient poses some additional restrictions and requires evidence to be placed on this. With that, I'll hand it to Ashley.
Thanks, Deepak. Yeah, so I'm coming from Canadian Health Food Association. We work with Health Canada all the time with regards to natural health products. And what we see with regards to whether it's this file or a different file is their kind of North Star is always to protect the health and safety of Canadians. And I'm reiterating that because I think it's important to keep in mind, you know, what motivates their policies, what they will always fall back on, because if you are working on putting a submission together, feedback together, it's important to know what's most important to Health Canada, and that helps to frame how you provide your feedback, what rationale and kind of persuasive arguments that you might include in some of your feedback. So anything that you're providing, you want to ensure that, you know, you're showing how the health and safety of Canadians will be upheld in anything that you're proposing, or say anything that you are contradicting from the proposal. You'll want to provide rationales to why this would uphold the health and safety of Canadians. But with that said, so if there is enough scientific evidence on the therapeutic effectiveness and safety to make this shift from currently the prescription drug list, like outside of the Cannabis Act, the prescription drug list, Health Canada is considering amending the existing natural health product framework, as was mentioned. But it's clear that safety and efficacy is top priority for Health Canada. As part of that, I just wanted to give a bit of a definition, on natural health products. So there's two elements. Deepak spoke about the substance element, but there's also the function element, and this is where efficacy research really comes into play. So function element being the diagnosis, treatment, mitigation, prevention of a disease, disorder, or abnormal physical state, and then restoring or correcting organic functions and modifying organic functions. So within Health Canada's proposal, they have proposed that that NHPCCs would require pre-market approval. This is consistent with what is required for natural health products, and this is where they would do the assessment for safety and efficacy. They have also proposed that NHPs would be authorized with a specific health claim, which requires scientific evidence with a direct link to the health claim. Again, this is consistent with the natural health product framework. And what we have also seen in the proposal is that traditional use claims would not be permitted for NHPCCs, nor would general health claims. So those are health claims that with like low value, low therapeutic value. An example of this is an antioxidant claim. You want to just go to the next slide for me?
Yeah, is it
Perfect.
gone?
So as I was saying before, health and safety is of primary concern to Health Canada, and it seems as if they're taking a risk-based approach to this, and they have grouped safety and efficacy together. This is consistent with how it's done within the natural health products framework. However, for this particular case, I've separated out some points for safety and efficacy because they are different in as so far as advancements in that area. So we've already heard from the scientific advisory committee that concluded that 200 milligrams of CBD per day taken orally is considered safe and tolerable for healthy adults. Where there's a need for additional information is on drug interactions in subpopulations like pregnant and breastfeeding populations. As far as the efficacy goes, Health Canada has considered NHPCCs to be one, novel, and two, to be in a high risk category for self-care. And for this reason, they're saying that the novel, because they're considered novel, they're falling in a high risk category, and therefore they need more data with regards to efficacy. You want to go back? Sorry, just a
All right.
little change.
My fault. I got too excited for the next slide.
Okay. We have seen since the time of the SAC report. So the SAC report said they needed more evidence with regards to efficacy, but that was in 2022. We're now sitting in 2025. We've seen a lot happen. There's a lot more information available now. So that is something that can also be presented in your feedback to Health Canada. Shane, go ahead and jump to the next slide.
Okay, so this is where I come in. Basically, the next question that Health Canada is looking for feedback on really kind of groups together some really heavy duty stuff. It's site licensing, good manufacturing practices, and product quality. So really, what Health Canada here is suggesting is that there will be a need for a site that is a GMP site for if you're manufacturing and making NHPCCs, which are CBD and NHPs. This is the same as NHPs. So currently, if I'm making a melatonin sleep supplement in Canada, I need to be on a site that is an NHP regulated site and it has an NHP license, and as a result, to get that license, I need to meet the GMP requirements. And many folks in cannabis understand the difference because they're exporting to Europe, where they do also require that GMP. So it is a big jump from a quality perspective and from a systems and operational perspective. Something to consider as we go forward. And that's only just for products, right? So the API though is which is the raw material. So for example, an LP wants to do a CBD extract and then sell it to an NHP operator, or transfer it to their own NHP operator, or someone who's contract manufacturing for them. That's not going to require GMP. That is going to require probably this GPP and maybe to do the extraction, and then when it goes into a GMP site, it will have to be qualified and released as into that GMP manufacturing site for the final product. And that's the same as the NHP operates. The other piece is the proposal of, they are asking questions around physical and personal security requirements. They're suggesting it will be the same as NHPs, which is not as strict at all compared to cannabis regs. So that's a very good piece of news. So certainly if you're using CBD raw material, that's whatever that ends up being defined as, you will not need any extra security or personnel physical security or issues at all. They are requesting, if you read the consultation and you read the questions that they put out, they are trying to understand how CBD or, any minor cannabinoid, if we get there, but in this particular case, CBD, is transferred out of the cannabis regulatory framework into the NHP framework. And the next slide is not very simple to understand, but bear with me and let me walk you through it. So what we've done here, we've tried to put it on one slide, the entire cannabis regulatory framework on the right as you look at it, and then on the left, the Food and Drugs Act process and basically the NHP regs. So let's start at the start of the production chain and the operational side. So cannabis would be grown in the cannabis regs system, and I include hemp in that. The processing of that would be done within licensed holders within the cannabis regs. They would then produce a product, which in this case we're proposing at 99.8% cannabinoid extract or an isolate. And then once that has the appropriate COAs and quality standards met in relation to purity or impurities, as the case may be, it will then be allowed to be transferred into the NHP regulatory framework. At that point, then a manufacturer with an NHPCC license or an NHP license, whatever way they work it through, will be able to make the product. Certainly, you'll see later down the slide where we're proposing, the distribution model would be the point of sales would be two ways. One would be products that would be less than 200 milligrams of CBD, and in that case, that's per day dosing. That would be allowed to be sold more widely to consumers. So as consumer good distribution, same way your multivitamins or your most people don't know, but your Hall's lozenges are NHPs, and they have a health claim, and they can be sold at gas stations or grocery stores. And so this is the idea. And then the flip side of it is, as you go up the risk in relation to 200 milligrams plus, you're looking at a behind the pharmacy counter perspective, and that's an idea. But just to get back to the concept of manufacturing, we would like to see to be able to define what a cannabinoid, or in this case CBD extract, would be that would be acceptable to move into the NHP system from the cannabis regulatory system. I'm sure that is clear as mud, and I'm sure we'll have questions, but I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, Shane, I think, the important thing, and I've talked to many people about this, is that, the way that this is being contemplated is that licensed producers would be, as Shane mentioned, sort of the API manufacturers in this case. And then if you actually want to conduct downstream activities of manufacturing, you would then, need to apply for an NHP site license and be able to actually conduct these activities. Now, LLPs that are making submissions may want to consider to Health Canada just make an amendment to their license to be able to include NHP activities versus doing a new submission. It's just something for consideration to those that are already in the licensed producer segment. That's the only other thing that I would probably add in here, Shane. Yeah,
and to do that, though, just to flag, you would, what Health Canada is proposing is that you would have to meet GMP requirements to amend your license. So how that would operate from a within a site is the usual problems that we all have with GMP production versus GPP production in cannabis. So it won't be as simple as just asking for it. There will be a requirement to meet certain quality standards as Health Canada is proposing. Back to Ashley.
Okay, so packaging and labeling, this is a bit more simplistic, so we can go through this fairly quickly, but labeling and packaging requirements that are being proposed are consistent with those that are already in place for natural health products. So generally, this means that the label must provide information on the medicinal and non-medicinal ingredients, recommended dose, indications for use, and any risks. Health Canada in their proposal has posed a question about consideration whether an NHPCC should require a CBD warning statement. So that is something they are asking people to provide feedback on. One thing that the SAC, or the Scientific Advisory Committee, did say is they recommended that packaging include information on drug interaction. So whether that be like directly on the label or a leaflet inside a box. Something to that effect. And then I've just included a note down here that I have said, packaging and labeling requirements would be consistent with those already in place for natural health products. Right now, the labeling requirements for natural health products is under review and may be changing. So these requirements might change before NHPCCs are in market. But as of right now, the label you see on the screen is kind of an example of what information is found on a natural health product. This is a generic mock-up. It's not anything that's actually in market. So products in market have a little bit more branding to them, a little bit more color, that sort of thing, which you don't necessarily see with cannabis products. So there will be a little bit more room for creativity there, moving from a cannabis product to an HPCC. And sorry, Shane, did you have something to add?
No, that just looks like a medical cannabis product.
Yeah, it was for illustration purposes, but
Yeah.
go to your local health food store, and just look at any sort of vitamin, mineral supplement, that sort of thing. That's the type of packaging and labeling we'd be looking at.
I think the key issue here is that it will provide some relief to the marketing and branding concepts around CBD. Better than cannabis, but not great.
Yes.
But still better, much better than cannabis.
Much better than cannabis.
All right. Ashley, we're going to touch on the clinical trial issues now.
Yeah, so as I was speaking about when we were talking about the safety and efficacy, it's just a really important point for Health Canada. They want to make sure that any NHPCC products are supported by adequate evidence. Now, I think there's a bit of room for discussion on what this adequate evidence could look like. In Health Canada's proposal, they have said, that they would require scientific evidence, such as phase 3 clinical trials, or the evidence that's generated through phase 3 clinical trials. Sorry. As an example, I'll get back to that in a second, but what I wanted to give you a picture of is NHP classification. So there are 3 classes of NHPs with increasing risk profile. So Health Canada considers a class 3 natural health product as the highest risk. And from Health Canada's proposal, it seems as if they would consider an NHPCC to be a class 3. So this would mean no monograph, and therefore require scientific evidence. They've also, within those classification, within the class 3, there are 3 risk categories. So, and they've put it at the highest risk. So class 3 being the highest, and then within that 3 steps, the highest step there. And that determines the evidence type that is required. So that's what's been in the proposal. Health Canada heard from stakeholders in previous consultations the need for robust evidence. So they've doubled down, and this is where they've come up with their such as generated through phase 3 clinical trials. You see on the screen here in red lettering, this is problematic. It is concerning because I am not a clinical trial expert, but from speaking with a colleague of mine in the field, she is an expert in, like, an academic and clinical trial expert in the natural health product field. And she has said that phase 2A and phase 2B has, in her experience, always been enough to generate evidence for a novel ingredient with no safety or efficacy profile. So that's for something that is a novel ingredient with no previous profile, don't understand what it's doing. However, we know that CBD is already in the market, right? So there's probably opportunity for discussion here on, we do have a profile for CBD. So that's where I'm saying, like, it's problematic. Class or phase 3, clinical trials are very timely, very expensive, hard to undertake. So Health Canada has asked for feedback on whether it's any anticipated barriers or barriers that have already been experienced with regards to clinical trials, and how that might impact the ability to produce evidence for NHPCCs. But I don't know if anyone else has any comments on clinical trials, but that's a bit of a summary. It is a big, lofty topic within the proposal, and one I think that 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 definitely needs more discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. We can get into that a little bit later on the questions. I think it's a huge issue, and it sets up the problem where Health Canada will say, yes, there's a pathway, it's legal, but they're setting the standard to a ridiculously high standard that wouldn't even, you're basically a pharma standard that would basically prevent anyone from getting there. So they'll be able to say hand on heart, there's a process and there's a pathway, but it's not attainable.
Yeah, like
Well,
on paper,
and if I could just,
but it's almost a non-starter. Sorry, Jay.
yeah, absolutely. No, and if I could just interject, one of the problems with this component here is that it really puts us out of step with other international markets. We take a look at what's happening in the US and how freely available CBD is. We look at some of the other markets around the world. That would put an undue restriction on Canadian producers and on the ability for Canadians to be able to bring products to market for our own patients, for our own general use, which quite honestly just promotes the black market, right? It promotes an illicit market that allows these products to be able to make their way through without the proper testing efficacy that we want to be able to have. So there's a line that we need to not cross here.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, a phase 3 clinical trial is you're not getting out of it somewhere between, like, at best, close to $1 million Canadian. I might be a little less, Deepak, but
Yeah, I would suggest
so.
so. Yeah. And just in addition to what Jay already mentioned, Australia, for example, has already gone down this pathway of descheduling as an OTC item, and there's actually a lot of data in Australia and even in the UK and Europe that we should be able to adapt. So as you're submitting your recommendations to Health Canada, I think one of the pieces is let's use some of that literature and data both on adverse events, but also with respect to toxicity and stability and all of the other stuff that exists in international jurisdictions.
Right. Okay, Ashley, I think you're still up.
All right. So advertising and promotion. This is another area similar to packaging and labeling, where we see, a loosening of restrictions going from the Cannabis Act to products that are regulated under the Natural Health Product regulation. So again, any advertising promotion restrictions, would be consistent with those already in place for natural health products. So it will allow for a broader ability to promote and distinguish CBD products, talk to consumers of those products, etc. One thing I did want to note is natural health products are for prevention and maintenance of good health. So in no case should there be statements about treatment or curing disease. And just another note is that Health Canada does not review or pre-clear advertisements for NHPs.
Right. Okay, Danielle, of course, place of sale. It's a busy slide and we're running out of time, so go for it.
Yeah, I would say the shortest part of this presentation, but probably one of the most spoken about, is the place of sale for these products. We see in the consultation that Health Canada has considered many outlets for these products, from online, health food store, pharmacy, which is interesting because if you recall back to 2022, the SAC said if anyone's taking medication, they should go through a pharmacy consult. Therefore, all CBD products should only be available in pharmacies. So we have quite the different proposal over the last couple of years, lots of discussion around place of sale. What's the most interesting part of this is that Health Canada has not taken a risk-based approach. And since 2022 to now, we've seen a risk-based approach in cannabis. And if we look back over the last, 10 to 20 years, we've seen a risk-based approach in pharmacy as well for other drugs. So Australia, as Deepak mentioned, they're allowing for over-the-counter since 2021, 150 milligrams of CBD. We haven't seen a large amount of adverse reactions with CBD, even considering the large amount of CBD consumption in Canada since legalization and prior to with medical. In the US, Jay mentioned as well, that we have big box retailers, like Walmart has a CBD specific page on their e-com site for these products. And then on top of that, the SAC did agree to a safety limit up to 200 milligrams back in 2022. So in pharmacy, we see that as well, like iron, some decongestants, etc. We have some that are behind the counter that require a pharmacy consult, and then some at the front of the store, depending on the strength of that drug. So with all this in mind, if we look at the different options for these products, for your consideration, I mean, the one I prefer is in bold, but we can see behind the counter as proposed by 2022 with SAC, allow for self-selection. So that would be in the front of the store, online, etc. For all of these products, or we can focus in on a risk-based approach following the scientific committee's recommendations, and also close to what we've seen on Australia. So 200 milligrams behind the counter requiring pharmacy consult, and then under 200 milligrams would be self-selection. So lots to discuss there, but I encourage everyone to include this as a speaking point in their consultation, as we've seen quite a variety of proposed outlets over the last couple of years on this topic.
Right, thank you.
And then,
Deepak. Oh, so sorry.
yeah, world places of sale, over to Deepak.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Danielle. So
No problem.
just by way of background, so I think what Health Canada is proposing in this consultation is basically following the import-export restrictions that currently apply to the Cannabis Act and all cannabis products currently sold in Canada. Obviously, that is extremely problematic. So by way of background, Canada's interpretation is that CBD is a controlled substance as per UN treaties. And the last time Health Canada actually looked at this issue was in July of 2020. They really haven't updated their position since. However, the world has. So the WHO, the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence, did a critical review of CBD, and basically they found that CBD up to 0.2% THC are actually not under international control, and they recommended updating that as a footnote in the treaties to avoid countries like Canada that might be confused with respect to the position on scheduling of the substance in particular. We've of course seen countries like the United States, Switzerland, a number of other European countries move that 0.2 all the way up to 1%. So what does that mean from an NHP framework, and assuming that we are allowed to manufacture these products? There's a bunch of misalignment. What that would mean would be NHP producers that are looking to export this product, or licensed producers that may be manufacturing these products that are looking to export it, would actually need to apply for import and export permits. And that becomes really tricky, because when you look at something that is not controlled in different countries, and I've had this situation happen to me in Switzerland, we've had to then apply for something called a no objection certificate to be able to import CBD, because Switzerland says, hey, this is not a controlled substance. We therefore don't need to actually issue an import permit. And Health Canada says, no, you need to then basically get me a no objection certificate from Swissmedic. And all of that takes a bunch of time. So really, if we don't change this interpretation, and if Canada doesn't actually change their interpretation of the UN treaties, which the WHO has outlined to them on how they would do it, it places restrictions on how we might be able to actually start to do international trade in these products, both importing product potentially as API, but probably more importantly, exporting product to the international market. And remember, we're competing with countries like the United States that are currently exporting CBD products into global markets. And then the last thing really is with respect to personal possession limits. That's one of the questions they have. I think this we can all agree on. Where they currently sit on this is probably the right approach, where they propose this not to be part of the restrictions that the Cannabis Act has with respect to general possession limits. So I think this is probably one area that we're aligned with the recommendations with this consultation. Shane, back to you.
Excellent, thank you. So there is, as part of this consultation, a whole section on veterinary drugs containing CBD. So we're calling them VDCC. I'm going to touch really quickly because I really want to get to the questions on this, but it will be an interesting area. CBD, especially in the canine world and around the world, is a very valuable market. Health Canada, however, has some challenges with the way it's structured right now. If they wanted to make a veterinary drug containing CBD. There is a system called the Low Risk Program, which basically in Canada for veterinary drugs that are NHP, they're not really drugs, but in the context of what we call a drug, they would be a low risk product. So think of turmeric supplements for your dog, for inflammation. There's a whole bunch of what we call natural remedies for dogs and pets in general that would be used. The concern here, of course, is that there are some animals that are, if you give them a veterinary drug or give them access to products from a veterinary perspective, they could get into the food chain. I'm thinking, horses, swine, etc. So there's a whole different risk aspect to that. But really, what I think Health Canada's focus on is around canines, and to do that, they have talked about removing phytocannabinoids and CBD from the prescription drug list, was PDL here. They want to do this because currently they feel there's no ability to have the veterinary health products notification program be used here. I think we would disagree. I think CBD alone would fall nicely into a veterinary health product if there's enough evidence, and the notification program for low risk veterinary products would certainly be utilized here. Like in the human side, there will be no general health claims for a veterinary health product. They are again proposing a 10 ppm limit of THC for these veterinary health products with cannabis CBD. They are, as per with all veterinary products, requiring a GMP requirement for sites. They are looked at limiting oral doses based on the evidence to between 0.2 and 2 milligrams kg twice a day for treating pain with canines. There's certainly a lot of evidence out there, and certainly that would be leveraged. And again, they are proposing, which I think we would disagree with this, that only sale in a vet clinic, so no pet stores, etc. So you can see here they're trying to design a system around veterinary health products as opposed to veterinary drugs for products containing CBD, and that's something that I recommend everyone have a look at, and we'll move swiftly on, and I'm sure we'll get to some questions around this as well. So handing over to Jay here.
Sure. So really quickly, we'll just run through a couple of key things here. So from an opportunity perspective, this is over almost a $2 billion market as far as Canada is concerned. When we look at it internationally, we're north of $20 billion US. So this is a very important component of the market for all of the licensed producers, but also for NHP providers across the country. There is considerable illegal marketing going on of products in Canada right now, typically through mail order, but also in some retail establishments. And that really raises a lot of health concerns and risk concerns that we really need to address. A regulatory certainty obviously would allow, for a much safer market to expand, both for us to be able to create here in Canada, but also on an international basis. So being able to be that great ingredient supplier and exporter as Canada has become on the cannabis side, being able to do this can continue on out. We move on to the next slide then, Shane.
Yeah.
So the call to action, realistically, Health Canada has been slow walking this process. They've really been taking their time. We know that this has been called out in the original Cannabis Act, has been around and discussed for a long time. We really need to move this forward. The only way to move this forward is to keep the pressure on. Really, the next step that we're looking for is a notice of intent to be published. That notice of intent needs to incorporate in as much feedback from industry as possible. So we need to keep a focus and pressure on to be able to ensure that we get the right outcome here. Pressure from the industry is really required. This can't just come from a couple of organizations providing a little bit of feedback into Health Canada. That's not going to do it. We need to have numbers, and we need to have lots of multiple voices, particularly around any contentious issues. So if there's something that you see that stands out, you need to stand up and have your voice heard. So we really need to have that push happening from as many organizations, small and large. We really need those voices out there. It's really important for us to be able to provide a vision about what we're doing. So if there's a specific needs that you have, specific vision that you want to see as far as NHPCCs are concerned, we need to make sure that voice gets heard. To be involved in the process, we need to get our responses submitted. The responses to the consultation need to be in by June 5th. There's a deadline. The link is here at the bottom. That's been created into a tiny URL. Thank you, Shane, so that we can go ahead and get that out as well. So when we circulate this presentation, you can follow through on that. Additionally, you can also submit via email. The email, though, needs to have the subject line, notice to stakeholders, health products containing CBD discussion paper. That needs to be in the subject line, so very important here. Moving on to the next slide, we can probably just leave this up on the key points and key highlights as far as CBD in Canada and the regulatory snapshot, while we go ahead and move forward onto questions so that we still have some time. So if you can place your questions into the Q&A, by all means, please, we'll go ahead and answer those questions. If you're having problems with that, Shane, perhaps we can unmute so that people can go ahead and ask their questions as we go along as well.
I wish I knew how to do that.
All right. So let's try to rely on the Q&A process then. If you can go into Q&A, which should be at the top of your screen, click on that. You can go ahead and ask a question and just type that in there.
So we've got 3 questions on the docket already. Certainly there's a question here from Michelle Rivera. Ashley, can you elaborate on your comment on minor health claims such as antioxidant, for example? If I want to produce a CHP and stated it has antioxidant properties due to other ingredients such as botanicals, is that acceptable?
Yeah, sure. So how I read this is as Health Canada's way of saying, like, an antioxidant claim alone is not something that's going to qualify a cannabis health or like a CBD for the addition to a natural health product to consider it an HPCC. However, I would say that this is a good point to ask Health Canada. If you're submitting feedback, I always use it as an opportunity to ask for clarification from Health Canada. That's how I've interpreted it. It could mean, like, if you're asking and you want to clarify with Health Canada, I would ask that question and say, you know, if you're looking at a multi-ingredient product, could you get a health claim on the other ingredient in the product for antioxidant use? And then, of course, it would be some other therapeutic benefit for CBD. That is the way I read it. But of course, we're very early stages. Regulations have not actually been proposed. So this is an opportunity to help shape those regulations. I don't know if you're able to speak or raise your hand, but if that doesn't answer your question, please put a follow-up question in the Q&A box.
We can take follow-up questions for sure. There's the ability for Michelle or anyone else who asks questions to write follow-up right under their responses. Next question from Trina Fraser. Where do you suggest we provide comment on the THC limit for NHPCC, since it isn't actually a question on a consultation form? Deepak?
Yeah, for sure. So I think if you go to question 10, when you're actually submitting and filling out the question, it's on page 3. There's a general question box here from Health Canada that says, are there additional comments or suggestions you would like to share that could help developing NHPCC pathway for human use? That's where I would put in the 10 ppm kind of response.
Yeah. Plus, you can also email them directly. There is that option. Just because you're locked into the questionnaire doesn't mean you can't do it elsewhere. I'm going to take one question. Then I see Michelle has a hand up. I'm going to get to that hopefully, but there's another question from Joe de la Plante. Is this group aware of any clinical trials that are currently underway for CBD or any other minor cannabinoids?
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that a bit. Like, there are quite a few clinical trials currently underway. It really depends on what phases they are and what indications they are, right? And again, back to our original recommendation that we should be able to use data that exists elsewhere. Recently, Australia just completed a trial on this for a specific indication of sleep, and I would love to see us leverage some of that indication, some of that data for a specific indication. So there's quite a few. If you go to clinicaltrials.gov, there's a bunch of resources that actually show you all of the trials that are occurring globally. Shane, don't know if you had anything more to add.
No, I was going to point to clinicaltrials.gov, which is a great website. And there is a lot of different clinical trials. Of course, there's different phases of clinical trials. And of course, each clinical trial is related to a specific ailment. So you can have, and that's what Health Canada will be looking for, depending on what your claim, i.e. it will, help with or maintain health for X issue ailments, so lack of sleep, for example, you will need specific clinical data just for that, right? So it's quite specific on that point. Okay, Michelle indicated that was a perfect answer, Ashley, thank you. I've got another question here, and I'll just publish it from Danny at Shav. We own Danny. So question one, other minor cannabinoids accepted under NHPCC? My view is yes, framework clearly limits CBD to the only active ingredient and imposes 10 ppm THC impurity, but it does not explicitly ban minor cannabinoids as long as compounds like CBG and CBGC are naturally present, not deliberately added. Sorry, I've just lost it here. Not deliberately added or declared, and they should be acceptable, similar to how background constituents are handled in other botanical extract regulators for natural health products. I'm happy to take this if someone else wants to have a look at it, but I think the concern that we have is that they've narrowed the scope to this consultation down to NHPs with cannabidiol, not cannabinoids. And I think, yes, as by impurities, the only one they're concerned about is THC. But if you wanted to use CPG as the main cannabinoid in a natural health product, it's not clear in the current consultation how that could be done, because the consultation only speaks to cannabidiol, not, yes, as an impurity, CBG, THC, fine, that's okay, because they're still allowed to be there. But actually, as the form, as a medicinal ingredient, as something that you're marketing it for, it's not clear that that's possible. I don't know if anyone, Deepak, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, Shane. I think that you are correct on that. I would say that the Scientific Advisory Committee actually recommended all other, many other cannabinoids on the low risk side to be included. So if that's something that, Danny, you're interested in doing, I would 100% recommend you put that as a feedback to Health Canada, reference them back to the Scientific Advisory Committee report that actually outlines that, to be able to point out why it might be important to include other minor cannabinoids, including, naturally occurring cannabinoids that may be in the plant.
Okay, so Stephanie Cladwell, happy to see a pathway for CBD and NHPs being considered, but wondering what your thoughts are on the takeaway from the potential profits of this pathway from struggling cannabis industry and giving those profits to existing profitable NHPs industry based on Health Canada's current proposed pathway. Is there a better way to incorporate this into the cannabis industry to boost profits? Jay.
So I was just, when you look at this, quite honestly, this is a great opportunity for those struggling cannabis companies to be an ingredient supplier. There's an opportunity here for us to change or to pivot slightly on the product that we're producing and to be able to ensure that we are producing an ingredient that a consumer wants. If that, in going back to the diagram that Shane had talked about, it actually provides that ability for us to be able to produce the ingredient and then hand it off to an NHP to be able to brand and take to market, or to be able to, for us to be able to follow the cannabis pathway. So I think there is an opportunity here, and quite honestly, I think it's a huge one.
Yeah, I would just add that there's nothing stopping CBD without a health claim still being sold in the struggling cannabis industry.
Exactly.
So I think what we're seeing here would be a normalization of CBD in a broader range of markets that I believe would actually, a tide that would float more boats for everybody, right? So certainly, and then there's potential exports, and then if you can partner, there's potential for partners between cannabis industry and NHP groups, and they have the licenses like we see currently for exports, right? There's partnerships occurring for people who have GMP sites and people who don't. So certainly, it's a great question, but I think it's certainly one that I think we could all answer. Danielle, you have a hand up on this one.
Yeah, and we've run some research that shows that a lot of these products are being bought from the illegal market right now. Like the consumer that's walking into the retail cannabis stores is not generally the consumer of these products, and they're buying them online, not knowing that they're illegal. So I do see that as an opportunity to grow the pie, not necessarily eat all the slices within it. So I'm pretty optimistic this may even help increase the sales of these types of products within current retail cannabis shops if they choose to continue to supply them.
Okay.
That's a great point, and you see that both in the gray market here, or the illicit market in Canada, but also when you take a look at international markets where the product is available, it's not necessarily the individual that's good accessing either the medical cannabis space or the legal recreational cannabis space. It's someone who is just looking for a natural health product.
Yeah. John S.A. has a question. Of the other minor cannabinoids that could be considered to be included, which cannabinoids have sufficient evidence to be a CHP? Are other countries also allowing this for minor cannabinoids? Great question. I noticed a lot of published data on CBG. I do know, because some of these are not controlled, like in the UK, there has been options for creams and non-novel food options for some of these minor cannabinoids. And, I think there is an opportunity, but more research would need to be done to actually make the claim here. And certainly that, but I don't think it's a high risk level of evidence that's required. I think it would be, again, a lower level. Maybe Deepak, you want to speak on this question, because I know you've done some international work on this.
Yeah, I would say I don't really have a lot more to add, Shane. I think you've outlined it pretty well. CBG does have a bunch of data. I think CBN also has some data. I think it's important really in the submission to be able to point to Health Canada that, as the Scientific Advisory Committee has mentioned, as Health Canada themselves have mentioned at the outset, they should start looking at things beyond just CBD, right? So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from this question. And I will outline for everyone on the call before we wrap, if there's one real takeaway, I think it's really the slide that's up before you now in terms of some of the key points that you want to consider in your submission and feedback that you may want to incorporate. And we'll post this and share this as well externally.
Yeah, I think we had hoped the CHPC to actually put together a draft response. So question by question is what we would suggest, to give some thinking and catalytic thoughts to those who are making their own submissions. But certainly, we will, to this group and also on our website and on socials, once we put that together, we'll try to do it as quick as possible, because we want to have this conversation first. And obviously we know the June 5th deadline's coming quickly. We'll put it out so people can, review it, take what they want from it, leave what they don't want from it. And certainly I think it's a catalyst to be able to get you a little bit of a head start on some of the issues that we discussed here today. Of course, we appreciate everyone's time. I don't think there's any other questions. Oh, there's one. Sorry, I didn't see it here. Let me publish it. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I should have read it before I published this. I don't have a specific question, but I wanted to thank your working group for the proactive effort to move the needle forward, to advocate and compile and disseminate this information with industry stakeholders. So that's great. More than welcome, Joe. And again, it's great if you want to stay in contact, go to our website, join our mailing list. We also have, we're active on the social media side of things, and also email is there. So again, this will, I hope, if it's recorded, I set it up to record, so fingers crossed. We were successful the last time. This will also be sent out for, there's one more question. It's from Danny. Sorry, I'm going to have to cut off the questions. Hold on. Let me see. We'll deal with it real quick. So my understanding is that 10 p.m. applies to final NHP product, not just the CBD input. That aligns existing regulatory threshold for hemp-based NHPs. From an industry perspective, this threshold is extremely strict, much lower than international norms. And yep, that's what we've been saying. Well, pushing for a higher limit would likely be difficult because of any change would require health to revise the current limit applied to hemp seed and other hemp-derived NHPs.
I can tackle this really quickly, Shane. I think that,
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're recommending, right? We understand that, hemp-derived seed and stock product has a naturally lower level of ppm, right? But I think the entire purpose of creating this additional pathway is to get away from that. There already exists a pathway for hemp products containing, minor cannabinoids and CBD in particular. I think the whole purpose of creating this structure is to allow kind of a higher potency product to be available, right? And we do know from a lot of evidence that exists that the higher the level of CBD, the more efficacy there is. So I think it's important to be able to kind of separate this from what exists on hemp. I understand there's a reason why it exists on hemp, but again, back to where the scientific advisory committee has already recommended up to 0.3%. I think it's important to at least get to 0.2% in terms of ppm. Shane,
Yeah.
That's just something I wanted to add.
I would add very quickly, don't forget that incorporated by reference into the cannabis regs and the Cannabis Act, I think, maybe it's just cannabis regs, but certainly is the US pharmacopoeia and references to monographs there and standards there. And they are currently actively suggesting that a CBD monograph would be defined as something at 0.2% THC with impurity. So I think we're going, I wouldn't be afraid to ask to push this 10 ppm because this 10 ppm, it's there for a reason. But other jurisdictions have moved away from it. I think it's one of the strictest in the world right now. So anyway, Danny, feel free to be in touch. Certainly, we understand where you're coming from on this, and happy to have a discussion. But again, just to wrap up, I know we're 8 minutes over, and so I apologize for going late. But thank you, everybody. Again, this will be sent around as soon as it's the recording is edited, and we'll hopefully get everybody our summary document as well, our suggested responses, and do please get the word out to respond by June 5th, because Health Canada needs to see that there is a robust interest in this area. And certainly it's not just the cannabis industry pushing or a couple of people pushing, it's basically across the board. So, we need to deregulate CBD at this point. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for the speakers. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.